Hello and welcome to the Race Dilemma podcast. My name is Drew Hawley and I'm here with my brother and co-host Daniel Sloan. This podcast is really about giving a voice to those people of a mixed heritage, initially within our own family whose racial background is not always obvious due to their pale skin colour, and have found themselves to be at the centre of a personal race dilemma, and at times having to prove their ethnic credentials in order to be heard.
And of course we have broadened the conversation out into the many corners of some of the so-called problems of being from a racially mixed background. And if you feel you may want to contribute or have a story to tell and would like to be featured on an episode, please reach out to us on the Race Dilemma podcast at gmail.com. And if you really like these episodes, please rate us and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and feel free to share with your family and friends. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Race Dilemma podcast. And on today's episode, we have our cousin Stuart with us, who was the catalyst for the idea of this podcast. Stuart's father is our mum's cousin, and both of his parents are of Anglo Indian stock. So if you could just remind me, Stuart, where both of your parents were born.
My dad was born in Peshawar.
And your mum?
My mum was born in Kodaikanal, which is in South India.
So Peshawar is the northern part of Pakistan, right? Nearly on the border with Afghanistan, isn't it? Right up there at the top.
Correct, yeah.
And so where did they meet then? Where did they meet, mum and dad?
They met in Karachi. So after my mum was born, soon after my mum was born, there was partition.
Mm-hmm.
So after partition, my granddad was in the Indian Navy. But again, after partition, he was told that he wasn't going to be able to rise up the ranks in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
He had friends that were in Pakistan, in the Pakistan Navy, and they spoke to their bosses and convinced them to let my granddad come over. So my granddad moved over to Pakistan, and joined the Pakistan Navy.
So they lived in Karachi, right? Because it's on the sea, isn't it? Anyway.
They lived in Karachi, yeah.
And your dad by that time had moved down to Karachi, and they'd met through the church or whatever, youth club or something like that, whatever it was.
I think they met. So my mum was actually best friends with my aunt first, my dad's sister.
Right, Maureen.
And then, even though there's a bit of an age difference there, they were best friends because I think they went to the same convent school.
Okay.
And then later on, my mum met my dad through his sister, and then they were together ever since.
Mm-hmm. So, just to give some clarity, then, both your mum and dad were of Anglo Indian stock.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So they got some British in them somewhere back, as our granddad did. Somewhere back. Although, to look at not your mum nor dad, but I mean, to look at our granddad, you wouldn't think so, because
it's probably the same with. It's really weird. Like, they're probably the same with my grandparents, on my dad's side, and on my mum's side as well, my grandparents. But even my dad's sister, even though she's quite fair-skinned, she looks Indian.
So Anglo Indian stock, and as you described, quite Anglo Indian. Doesn't mean to say that they're going to be particularly light-skinned nor particularly dark-skinned. There's every shade in between, isn't there, from very dark to very pale. Yeah. And you are of that Anglo-Indian stock because of your mum and dad, as is your brother, as are we, I suppose. And you, by your own description, you're quite pale-skinned, quite white, as you describe yourself.
Yeah.
But inside you don't feel that because you've got this heritage.
No.
Same as ours, you know.
Yeah,
and recently you've, I don't know how recently, but I think in previous conversations you said that it's made you think about things in a different way because people view you in a different way.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it came to the forefront. I wouldn't say for the first time. I'll probably say it came to the forefront again during the Black Lives Matter movement early this year.
And what was it?
Well, I was putting on a lot of posts on my Instagram, like supporting the Black Lives Matter, supporting just different aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I suppose, maybe not supporting Black Lives Matter, but trying to find ways where everyone can come together,
mm-hmm.
like trying to find solutions. But I think it was like one post. It was like saying, there's no need to be. It's not just something along the lines. You can't just be not racist. You have to be anti-racist. Meaning
gosh, what does that mean? Okay.
So meaning like it's okay not to be racist, but if you see people being racist, then you speak up about it as well.
Okay.
And then I was speaking to your daughter Florence,
mm-hmm.
She said, "Oh, I'm so glad you've put something like that up because I don't know." She was having a similar dilemma to me,
mm-hmm.
both quite fair-skinned, and people look at us on outside on the street, and you're not going to say, "Oh, you're half Asian," or
mm-hmm.
I mean, because of my jet black hair, maybe the same with Florence. People might think we've got something in us, but no one ever quite comes up to you and says, "Oh, what are you?" You can't really tell.
Well, the way my son described it, he was sort of describing what you just said, and he said, people don't know whether, he says, one of us or an outsider, he says.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite funny, really.
Yeah, so I was like, well, yeah, I've had it all my life. Like, my dad he's got quite olive tan skin,
mm-hmm.
same as my brother, but my mum and myself are quite fair skinned.
Mm. Have you got your mum's skin tone, haven't you?
Yeah.
Was there a time, sort of going back to your childhood, where you sort of first became aware of, actually, I'm Anglo Indian, or my parents are Anglo Indian, but I appear not to look Asian or Anglo Indian. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's something I didn't really feel in primary school. I mean, there were instances where I knew something was different, but I didn't feel it inside until secondary school. Looking at the time I did feel it, or I knew something was different in primary school. I said I knew something was different in primary school. I didn't feel it at that time, at that moment in time, because I was quite young. I was 7 or 8 years old. So I didn't. Being that young, I didn't know. Like, my mum and dad have always brought us up, or they brought us up at the time not to see colour. It was, growing up in Balham, the majority of my friends were black or Asian. But then I remember one of the children, he was a English guy. They asked, or his mum said, "Oh, Stuart and Mark get on really well. Why doesn't Stuart come over for dinner?" Now, they lived across the road from us.
Right.
So my mum was like, "Oh yeah, that's fine. Like, yeah, this is in Balham, yeah." So I remember going round, and I don't remember it from happening at the time, but something along the way, probably in secondary school, where I started to feel I was different. Something there's triggered this like memory I have of it. So I remember going into this person's house, and they said, "Oh, come into the living room."
Were you on your own, or with your mum? Or
yeah, I was with my mum.
Right.
And mums being mums, and I suppose little children at 7 or 8 going into someone else's house.
Mm-hmm.
I was holding my mum's hand.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going into their front room, and then turning around and seeing two older boys sitting on the sofa, and they had like shaved heads, and then above them was a flag of a swastika.
Oh dear.
So I just remember like seeing something like that, and then feeling my mum's hand grip my hand.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, obviously you can't. My mum didn't want to cause a fuss or anything. So she said, "Oh, like you have fun, like whatnot." Went off, and it couldn't have been more than 10, 15 minutes later. My mum came and picked me up, saying that, "Oh, Stuart's granddad has just flown in, flown into London. We
flown
need to
in
go
from Pakistan."
Yeah, we need to go and pick." To be honest, she probably could have said that. But I just remember her saying, "Oh, Stuart's granddad's flown in, and we need to go and pick him up from the airport." And then took me out,
and off you went.
And yeah, but like I said, I don't remember anything after leaving the house. So my mum could have explained to me at the time. I don't know.
I thought you were going to say that the mum asked your mum if he likes chips. Does he eat chips? Roast potatoes and everything like that. But a swastika, that's a bit heavier.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, it's just something I just remember.
Yeah.
I can still see it, like even now.
Had you forgotten about that then? Until you started talking about this stuff?
No, I hadn't forgotten about it. It's always been there, and it's something I've always, like I say, it's something I've always. When I talk about racism and the like, I've always said I haven't personally felt racism unless I've told people my background, and then I would get the odd comments, but I haven't, because of the way I look. It's not something like either yourself or Andrew or a black person on the street would actually feel it because they look different. Like I look slightly different, but people just say, "Oh, I'm pale enough to pass off for being white."
Yeah, so you're not too much of a threat, are you?
No. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I could be like a little Trojan horse, like getting into all the white street, like racists, and like blow them up from within. But
it must be quite. That is difficult though. Feeling how you felt because of your background, because of your mum and dad's, because of your home, your parental home, where you were, the culture, your mum and your grandma and granddad, all that stuff, and then you going out and looking white or looking very pale is very, very difficult. I don't think people realise actually. It really is a dilemma because, as my daughter described, that the inside you feel when she went to university, she felt as brown as the Asian girls there, but they didn't see her like that. She realised when she went, and then she thought she looked like all the other Asian girls, but she doesn't. And I didn't realise how difficult it was.
When you were growing up, you probably felt quite comfortable around people of different cultural backgrounds, right?
Yeah, completely. As I say, living in Balham, like it's a multicultural area, or it was, I should say. Growing up there, I mean, like I say, the majority of people I knew, all my friends, were black or Asian or even mixed race Asian. Like two of my best friends who I've known since I was 5 years old are of their dad's Indian and mum's English.
Okay.
So, and again, it's weird, strange for them because they don't. If you looked at them, you wouldn't be able to tell that they were.
Oh, really?
Like,
they wouldn't half and half
mixed either. Like very, very pale.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is Asian about them is the jet black hair.
Right. But did you say that? I mean, they some people may think they are from somewhere else, European, Southern European, Italian, Spanish, something like that. Yeah. Yeah,
correct. And they had like English, like Christian first names.
Yeah.
But an Indian surname.
What about you mentioned last week about going on holiday when you were a kid?
Yeah. No, going on holiday, like even
didn't you
this was probably more in secondary school.
Right.
Going on holiday and people saying, "Oh, like where are you going?" And it wasn't summer holidays. It was more like the Easter holidays because obviously going to somewhere like Pakistan in the summer is probably not advisable with the heat. Yeah. So it's probably like a lot easier the weather's probably more bearable
in Easter,
like between November and March.
Yeah.
time. So I remember, going and people saying, "Oh, where are you going on holiday?" And I'm excited about going on holiday and going on a plane somewhere. And I was saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to Pakistan." And people were like, "What? Where's that?"
We're going there.
Why are you going there? Yeah.
Like, oh, don't you mean Spain? Like somewhere like that? Like, no, I'm going to Pakistan. Like, why are you going there? And then again, having to explain, well, that's where my parents grew up.
Were they shocked? Like, when people found out for the first time that actually, oh wow, I had no idea, right?
Yeah, especially because like I've got for some reason, to be fair, is to do with on my dad's side, his paternal father was part Scottish.
Right, that's right.
So for some reason, I'm the only one I know in the family that's got a completely Scottish name, Stuart and Morrison.
Of course, yeah.
So I guess growing up, like people saying your name's, or you tell people, "Oh, yeah, but my parents were born in India, and grew up in Pakistan, but you're white." But I'm not.
But when you were growing up, and even to date, do you feel that you're carrying something around with you, Stuart? Is there something? Are you waiting for someone to say something, and you have to justify who you are? I mean, I say justify, but is there? Are you sort of dreading this big reveal? Should it ever happen?
I would say probably not as much now, because I'm probably more vocal about it now. I mean, that's not to say that's been in just this past year, but as I've grown up, I've been more vocal about where my parents have come, where my parents have been, or came from, where they were born, my grandparents. I've had it at work where people say, like, or people who know where I'm from. And then I remember you guys started, and he was a Muslim. Stuart's family's from Pakistan, and they're like, "What?"
Yeah, and he was surprised. He was really surprised.
Yeah, he's like, "You're from Pakistan?" Guys, yeah, my parents were born in India, but grew up in Pakistan and Karachi. And
has anyone sort of drilled further and gone, but are your parents white then?
Yeah,
like why? But why do you look pale then?
Yeah, I mean, that's when they do say, "Oh, but how come you look the way you are and you've got an English name?" And that's when I have to explain to them and go through. All right, yeah. So it's the Anglo Indians. That's gone back to the British Empire, and it's carried on.
Do you remember your Uncle Rudy?
Yeah.
He lived in Karachi, didn't he? I stayed with him. I stayed with him when I went over there, and I remember talking to him about the Anglo Indians, and saying to him, him saying to me about how I felt about fitting in over here. And I asked him about being Anglo Indian. I said, what's it like? Because, what was it like for the Anglo Indian? It must be quite difficult because you were this sort of buffer between the English and the Indian. The Anglo Indians really weren't, I mean, not your granddad, of course, but I mean, generally speaking, I don't think they were given positions of particular power. They may have been sort of mid-management or something like that, but they were not really pushed up to the top of the tree, as it were. I remember speaking to your Uncle Rudy about it, our Uncle Rudy about it, and he said exactly the same thing. He said that is our problem. We have a foot in both camps, we think, but we're not quite sure. One of us or one of them. And and I think sometimes it's felt a bit like that for me, although I haven't always been the one to decide what camp I go in. Others have decided it for me, which is fine. But, I just wondered if that was a problem for you or how you felt about.
Probably not as much for me, but probably more so for my parents.
Right.
I think especially growing up in Pakistan as well. I mean, at the time when they first started growing up there, Pakistan was a relatively new country after partition. And I think, I'm not saying they're not accepting of other religions now, but I think at that time they were more accepting of all different religions. And I think my dad said that about being Anglo Indian. The whites didn't want you.
Yeah.
But the Indians didn't want you either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like we were just in our own. They had their own little bubble growing up in Pakistan because, as you say, you weren't accepted by one one side, one part of your race or heritage, and you weren't accepted by another part of your heritage. So it was strange. They had like being Anglo Indian is like your own community.
Yeah.
Like even to this day now over here they have Anglo Indian dances, which my parents go to. Did you
feel part of that community? I know your mum and dad would, but did you fit into that? Did you feel that you could fit into that quite comfortably? And say, oh yeah, I belong here at the dances or the church halls or wherever it is you went.
Yeah, I think probably growing up, no, I didn't feel, but it's because it's like, who wants to go to a dance with their parents? So it wasn't because of the community. It was like, I don't want to be here. Like, I'm like 14, 15 years old. Like, I should be allowed to stay at home on my own by now. And then growing up even before that, you don't know because you're just playing with other children.
Yeah.
That are Anglo Indian, but some of them looked Indian, some of them didn't look Indian.
Yeah. The thing I always found strange amongst not your mum and dad, but other Anglo Indian people that I met along the way, even in Karachi, that you sort of made to feel that you were. Well, I was made to feel as though I was one of them, and I was one of them, but I had a different accent to them.
Yeah.
I got an English accent, but they've all got Anglo Indian accents, more Indian than English. So it was really difficult for me as well. I thought, do I belong here? Is this my lot?
I know. I mean, even to this day, like my parents, no. So people from my work have met my parents. One of the first things they'll say is like, but I thought you said your parents from India. I was like, they are, but they don't have an accent.
They do have a little bit of an accent, your mum and dad, don't they? But it's an Anglo accent, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not. I think they were expecting a full-on Indian accent.
They've got a subtle accent. I mean, we've grown up.
I don't realise it. Other people say they've got an accent.
Yeah,
and I obviously growing up with them, I've not. No, I don't catch on to it.
Obviously, your work colleagues are expecting like proper Indians, aren't they? Whatever a proper Indian is.
Yeah, I mean the only time I can pick up on their accents is if my mum's talking to someone in India.
Oh, really?
And then the accent comes across more naturally, and that's when I notice it. My mum has this tendency. She's a bit of an accent chameleon.
Okay.
So she's got she's got a lot of her cousins are in Scotland. And when she talks to them, all of a sudden she's got a bit of a Scottish twang as well. Yeah.
It was a way of fitting. It's a way of fitting in and being understood, isn't it? I think we all do that. You probably change your accent. Probably changes when you get to work. It may do, or may not. But I know when I used to work at the college, it did, and that's because people from other countries they have a hard time understanding people with the South London accent. So you have to sort of retune it, if you like.
Yeah, put on the T's. And
you just have to be understood, don't you? You have to be understood. Did your mum and dad ever meet any problems here? Did they ever meet any racism along the way? Because I remember when they came. I remember when your dad came. Mum and dad came in the early 70s, wasn't it? They came over. Yeah. I always thought your dad, incidentally, as another aside, I always thought your dad was the epitome of style. You know, I always thought he was really smart. He was really, always smart. Suits, hair done, shirt tight.
Funny you say that. Funny you say that. I only found out maybe probably about 2 months ago. We were going through some old pictures of my dad, and he sent some to the phone, and I was like, "Look at you posing," and my mum said, "Oh, that's when his cousin was taking photos of him for a magazine."
Oh, really?
I was like, wait. I was like, Dad was a model. And he was like, yeah, I was. I was like, there's no way you're a model in Pakistan.
No, but it was always really stylish, always smart. Yeah. I, as a young kid, I used to admire him from far. I think, how does he keep so clean and so nice? Everything's really shoes are tight, everything.
Yeah. I would say, you say that about my dad. My dad's the type of person that puts on a shirt and trousers to go shopping. Whereas all normal people just go in tracksuit or jeans and a t-shirt. He puts on a full shirt and trousers.
That's all right.
To go shopping.
I'm with him, even though I don't. I'm with him all the way. I think standards have slipped, to be honest. I think we're pretty scruffy now. But yeah. So did they ever meet any problems, Stuart, along the way?
Again, not that they've actually told us about. And I have even recently, I've pushed them to and asked them about it, and they haven't. I'm not sure they actually, if they did, and they just don't want to talk about it. But to me, they haven't said that they've ever come across any racism in this country. Their complexion, I think, maybe like giving them a little bit of a pass.
So, all right. So going back to you and that incident with the skinheads and the Nazi swastika on the wall, and from that point, say around about that time, were there times in school where you felt uncomfortable, where you felt that you didn't fit? What was a problem for you because of the way you looked and whose camp you got in? You fitted in.
Yeah, I think I'd say more so in secondary school, because I think in secondary school you're growing up with people who've probably got bigger voices than what they would have in primary school.
Yeah.
You're mixing, I think more so you actually realise you're mixing with older people in secondary school as well. It just feels like in primary school everyone's the same age, even though you're growing up from 5 to 11. It just feels like everyone's the same age in primary school, whereas in secondary school, there's people older than you, or it feels more real that there's people older than you.
I want to be a little bit provocative with you and ask you, if it's a bit of a naughty question, but if someone were to ask me, I'd say, was there any particular group that made you feel uncomfortable in secondary school?
I would say more if there was a group that made me feel a little bit more uncomfortable. Again, maybe it's my unconscious bias. It would have been like the white kids in school. Maybe because, like I say, maybe it's my unconscious biases because I grew up in Balham, growing up around black and Asian kids predominantly. My friends were black and Asian. So going into school, and I remember we were all splitting because a lot of my friends from primary school went to the same secondary school.
Where was that anyway, incidentally? Where was that?
Westminster City in Victoria.
Oh, really? Okay. I know.
Yeah. So I think it was there that I probably felt a little bit, good to say, we were all taken away from this bubble of being in the like one class in primary school.
Safety bubble by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and like being able to sit on the same tables as each other and whatnot. And then going into secondary school, we're all put into different classes or different forms. And then you're told where to sit, and you sit in alphabetical order. And all of a sudden I'm sitting next to this person I don't know, and he doesn't know me. I'm looking like, oh, right, this is actually a white person next to me.
Were you conscious of that, were you? Did you think about that in that way?
Yeah. It was like, I'm not used to this.
Because the primary school was so different.
Yeah, and because I was with my friends, and my friends growing up in primary school were, let's say, predominantly black and Indian.
And when you went to secondary school, you didn't look Indian, did you?
No, but I felt it. Yeah. That's what I mean. In secondary school is where I felt different.
Right.
Compared to, it was like, okay, these aren't the people I know now.
So you were not made to feel different. You just felt different inside. You felt different inside.
I felt different.
I guess when you're coming of age or you're a teenager, you become more aware of your background, who you are, and you become more proud of who you are as well, right?
Yeah. And I think, as you say, growing up, you're learning more. So at that stage, being 11, I'm learning more, not only from my mum and dad, but learning more from my grandparents as well. Because after school, we would go to my grandparents.
Yeah, that's right.
After school until my mum finished work, and then she'd take us home.
This is your mum's mum and dad, right?
Mum's parents, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was only because my dad used to work nights. Yeah. So we couldn't go home after school because he'd be sleeping.
Okay.
And then by the time there'd be a gap basically between the time he'd have to leave to go to work and my mum getting home.
Yeah.
So we stayed at my grandparents after school. So that's when learning more from them and being around that, I suppose, culture. Like it's gone from coming home from school, and my grandma would always make us a little snack before for after school, and sometimes it'll be like chicken nuggets, fish fingers, and chips and whatnot. But then other times it'll be a curry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you start thinking, oh, right, yeah.
And chapati.
Yeah.
But I mean, your grandma and granddad and your mum and dad, I mean, it's all very cultured, isn't it? They're all very, very nice and very cultured, very together family, very together part of the family. And I would imagine as a young boy, that would have been very nice for you, very comforting, very nice for you. You could learn so much, especially from your Uncle Jack being in the Indian and Pakistani Navy. He had high standards, very educated, very clever. That must have been brilliant for you as a young boy growing up. And to have a granddad like that,
it was.
You know,
fantastic. It was. And I think anyone who knows me knows how close I was to my granddad, especially.
Yeah.
I think a lot of his morals got passed down to my mum. My mum's passed them down, but I think even to my dad, like I suppose I'm not sure how it is in other families, but he was very like well received by the in-laws, whereas I suppose now you hear the stereotypical.
Oh, your dad had and has got very high standards. He was very well brought up. Your dad, extremely,
But I think you hear the stories of the son doesn't get on with the in-laws, or the wife doesn't get on with the in-laws and whatnot.
He's fantastic, your dad. He's absolutely fantastic.
My dad was very well received by parents, so I think in a strange way, my granddad's morals. Not saying my dad's mum and stepdad didn't have any morals, but a lot of my granddad's morals probably got passed down to my dad as well.
Yeah. I can hear you talking about your granddad in the same way, and I've often said to people, if you know me, you know how close I was to my grandma. Like you're saying about your granddad, you know. Yeah,
and it's strange because my dad would always say that about his Aunt Olive.
Okay.
As well.
Okay.
So it's something that seems to have been passed down, that everyone's got this connection with not just their parents, but someone attached to their parents.
I can see because of it and because of yourself, Stuart. I mean, you're very together. You've got no real race dilemma, have you? I can hear that you're very proud of yourself, extremely proud of your background, your granddad in particular, and everything that goes with that. And we appreciate you coming on. We're just saying it how it is and saying how you feel, really. And this was, as I said before, this was all sparked off by a conversation you may have had with Florence on the Instagram, and how distressed she was, and she was really pleased that you reached out to her, and I want to thank you for that. And
no, that's fine. Yeah, So, like speaking to Florence, it was, looking the way we are. It's if I try and ram this point too hard home, people are going to start looking at me funny and thinking, why are you so invested? Where it's like, hang on, this is me. This is my this is my background.
Exactly.
And especially during the Black Lives Matter part, it was even more so for me because of my nieces and nephews. They're mixed race. Like their mums, both their mums are Bayesian, like from Barbados. So, and we've had this talk before. It's like when they go out on the streets, no one's going to look at them and think they're mixed race.
No,
with their afro hair.
Yeah,
no one's going to say, "Oh yeah, you're mixed race." They're just going to be looked at as black. Okay. And I think that's one thing my brother's tried to do is educate them, his children as well, and for them to be proud of being black as well.
As I've said in the previous 2 podcasts, Stuart, I hope I don't know about the future. I don't know about our children's future and your nieces and nephews' future. But let's hope something gets sorted out. Let's hope it's a little bit better in years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be something that's going to take maybe, let's say, not our generation, not the next generation, or the generation after that. It's going to be a few generations down the line. And my view now is we can't change the past. But instead of trying to change the older generation's views, let's bring our children up with the correct morals.
Good, well said. And that's a great ending as well.
That's right. So Stuart, thank you so much for joining us on the Race Dilemma podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. If you've liked what you've heard, please subscribe on your favourite directory. And if you've liked it even more, then please rate us and leave a review on Apple Podcasts.
Again, if you would like to be featured on the Race Dilemma podcast, please reach out to us on theracedilemmapodcast@gmail.com. That's it from us, and we'll see you on the next episode.